Welcome to the online course on HSE. We are now discussing lectures on module 2, where we are focusing on operational safety. In the last lecture, we discussed about some of the lessons learned from few accidents. We will continue with the same with lecture 5, where we say lessons learned from HSE practices. Today we will discuss about couple of more accidents and incidents happened in offshore industry and try to gather information as far as safety assurance are concerned, or what are those conditions which has been violated, unwarrantedly or unknowingly, which led to these incidents or accidents. Let us say West Vanguard gas blowout. It is a very important incident, happened on 6th October 1995. Actually, this was an accident occurred on a semi-submersible drilling unit. The name West Vanguard. The accident happened when they were conducting exploratory drilling. Luckily, it was not a production drilling, because semi-submersible generally used for exploratory drilling in the initial. Happened in Haltenbanken area. Norway. Let us quickly see a summary of what had happened which led to the accident of West Vanguard. During drilling, interestingly, the drill bit entered a thin gas. The drill bit actually entered a thin gas layer which was located about 236 meter below the sea bottom. So, the moment the drill bit entered the gas layer, this resulted in causing an influx of gas. This entered into the wellbore. This is followed by a second influx. Subsequently, maybe after about 30 hours, the second influx happened. The third influx, which subsequently happened, resulted in a gas blowout. So, even you can see the chronology. Before a catastrophic incident occurs, there are sufficient warning stages which are generated with sufficient time intervals. So, if one can take a preventive measure in the design or by emergency existence methods, one could prevent catastrophic damages which could cause such gas blowouts. That can be one of the interesting lessons what we can learn from this accident. Can we relook the design so that when a warning is being generated by the system, what are our secondary plans to either shut down the system or exit from the system or safeguard the remaining parts of the system. The next point is very interesting. It was analyzed subsequently later. The drilling operation was carried out without a blowout preventer. That is very interesting to be noted. The blowout preventer, which is one of the vital component of any drilling stack, is not present or was not noticeably present in this exercise. So, this is a very vital point. This requires for a design revisit. This requires for an operational negligence. The next one is very, very crucial. Inexperienced personnel were deployed to start the pump, started, started pumping heavy mud. To stop the borehole. They subsequently also opened the valve to divert the gas flow. The intention was to divert it away from the drill stack. But unfortunately, erosion happened in the bends of the wall. Of the so called diversion line. This resulted in escape of gas. The gas entered the cellar deck from the bottom. Subsequently, ignition occurred. Approximately 20 minutes after the initial start. This led to a very strong explosion and fire. Now, to save the crew, 2 lifeboats were launched. So, we can say some of the lessons what we could learn by looking at the chronology of the events. As we understand, design revisit of drilling stack is an important lesson. Do not use even exploratory drilling without an important vital component of the drilling stack, which is the blowout preventer. Train people on emergency or exigency plan. Inculcate safety culture to all on board. So, HSE practice is very important, not as a training, but as inculcating a culture if you really wanted to avoid accidents of this order, which happen very rarely, but still the catastrophic damage or the consequences caused by this accident are very severe. Subsequently, one can also say inexperienced attempts made subsequently after the blowout to divert the gas flow. From the drilling stack is also a very important lesson. So, one should look into the diversion lines well ahead in planning, and therefore, HSE practices should be implicitly built in the safety policy of the company. So, HSE should not be looked as a diagnosing tool after an accident. HSE should be looked as a preventive and protective measure to avoid even hazards of this order, not an accident. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the screen now, there is a capture shown on the screen, which is giving a schematic view of the West Vanguard semi-submersible, which actually encountered a gas blowout on 6th October 1995, which resulted in a very disastrous explosion and fire. The next incident which we will discuss now is Ekofisk A riser rupture. The riser of a steel jacket welded platform Ekofisk Alpha ruptured due to the fatigue failure on November 1, 1975. The riser of the jacket platform ruptured due to fatigue failure. Failure actually occurred due to insufficient protection in the splash zone. The riser was not well protected in the splash zone, which actually led to a very serious corrosion. Actually, the leak took place at once at the lower part of the living quarters. The leak started at the lower part of the living quarters, and then subsequently caused explosion and flame propagation. So, resulted in explosion and of course, flame dispersion or flame propagation. The duration of the intense flame remained for a very short time. The intense flame remained for a very short time, the duration was very short. Interestingly, the gas flow was immediately shut down. So, lives were protected. Blast was completely eliminated. Because of the safety practices involved. Efficient firefighting system was in place. Which could save this incident. So, the firefighting approximately took for about 2 to 3 hours to bring down the event from a very basic level of acceptance. So, as a result of which the activities taken by people, only a modest damage was caused to the platform due to fire. The most important lesson what we learned from this incident is it is important to note that the location of riser below the living quarters is a bad design. So, when you talk about the front end engineering design layout of any offshore platforms, be careful that the production risers are not located in the close vicinity of the living quarters. The second lesson what we could learn, best training and emergency evacuation procedures were adopted which could save the platform from a blast. So, practically there were no injuries to the queue, there were no injuries to the crew and absolutely no fatalities. So, that is a very interesting lesson we learned, that how training and emergency evacuation planning could save even a catastrophic accident far from occurrence of that. The platform of course only suffered a limited damage because of fire for a short duration of intensive fire loads. So, let us ask a question comparing these two events. What do we understand and learn from these events? So, what do we learn? 1. There is a limitation of knowledge in forecasting the consequence of such events. The knowledge limitation in forecasting the consequences of the event, not the events. Is a very serious problem. It means people did not and do not pay attention to do proper risk analysis, because risk analysis will always focus not only the frequency of occurrence of such events, it also focus on the consequences of such events. The second interesting lesson, even though we have got a very good past experience of understanding or diagnosing the reasons for such accidents, this alone is not sufficient to calculate the sequence of outcomes. So, experience alone will not do, very clearly said by Trevor Kletz, 2003. The question is why? Why experience alone is not sufficient? Because such accidents are uncommon. This is fortunate. The most unfortunate is cannot be predicted. Why? Again the question is cannot be, why they cannot be predicted, why they cannot be forecast? Because most of them initiate from human negligence or human error. The design error is also a part of human error. You could see in many of the instances what we discussed in a couple of lectures, none of them failed because of mechanical fault. It is only because of the human cooperation or human coordination, either in the design or in the maintenance or in the shift handovers or inexperience in handling emergency situations, resulted in accidents. So, therefore, to avoid any accident of this order, especially in oil and gas sector, good HSE practice will always recommend very intensive, intelligent and capacity building with educational background to all people on board, so that such accidents can even be avoided at the initial stage itself. However, the catastrophic consequences in most of the cases would have been avoided by proper care in the design stage itself. So, proper care in the design stage, that is the first important remedial measure which we have to adopt. The second could be imparting emergency evacuation training. Which is very much part of the HSE practice. Should be imparted to all personnel on board as mandatory. It should not be imparted only once, it should be periodically updated, maybe once in a year, or very good practice could be at least once in about 6 months time. We have to continuously update people on emergency evacuation plan and procedures which is adopted, which is to be followed in any one of the cases. Now, you could interestingly see any public buildings you go, any important locations you go, you will always see in the beginning of the building or the entrance of the building, there will be emergency evacuation plan which will be posted or pasted on walls and painted, and there will be a video running as a safety precautionary measure that every public entering the building should be informed well in advance before they enter the building that where are the emergency exit doors, where are the fire exits, where are the lift locations, where are the stairways, in case of emergency what to do and what you should not to do. Similarly, when you go to hotels or stay in hotels, you will see when the rear side of the door, emergency evacuation plan will be pasted or painted on the back side of the door. So, every habitat of the door or resident staying in the hotel will easily understand in case of emergency what he should do and what he should not do. So, emergency evacuation is a kind of education which should be given to everybody. Of course, in oil and gas sector, people working on board, especially on drilling platforms, it has become very mandatory, and though it is being followed, but intensification of such trainings with educational support like HSE practice courses like this and hands on experience on training of certain emergency evacuation plan in firefighting etc. is very, very vital if we really wanted to prevent such accidents, which has happened in one of the cases. People intelligently diverted and prevented a catastrophic accident except for a minor damage to the platform. So, it all depends upon what level of training you undergo and how you take it seriously. Therefore, friends, please understand HSE practice is not an education, it is actually a culture which need to be followed. After understanding this, let us redefine slightly with more intelligent way what is risk. Now, let us redefine risk after understanding so many incidents, lessons learned from the accidents etc. After experiencing them virtually, let us see this. Risk is actually defined as the fatality and damages caused to the human and material which results in a financial barrier or financial loss to the investor. So, friends, please understand risk is now redefined in terms of economic terms. So, please understand risk is not directly related to human life. It of course encompasses safety of human on board with more focus towards saving or protecting plants and equipments, machinery, environment, society, which all could lead to a financial barrier to the investor. So, risk is a very large picture. Risk is not only all about loss of human life. Therefore, risk involves avoidance of loss and undesirable consequences. Risk also involves probability of failure and estimate of loss caused because of failure. Please understand, failure will be always expressed in probabilistic terms, but the financial loss which you would estimate based on this should not be in probability terms, it should be in definite terms. You cannot say probably it will result in a loss of so many $1 billion, no. Therefore, there is a very clear cut division between consequences and or the financial loss and the risk analysis. So, the risk analysis leads, because risk is actually a product of probability of occurrence or frequency of the event multiplied by the consequences. Frequency of the event generally expressed in probability of failure, but the corresponding consequence which will be looked only in economic perspective should not be in probabilistic terms, it should be in definite terms. One may ask me a question, why we are looking risk associated only with financial or estimate of economic loss. That is how risk is redefined. You can see here, though risk deals with fatality and damage caused to the human, but the focus is if that cause or that results in financial loss to the investor, then the risk is very high. So, therefore, risk is connected not directly to the human life or loss of human life, but it is connected directly only to the economic perspective of the whole system, which of course includes safety of the human being as well. Therefore, risk should always look into the consequences in terms of economic perspective, not in terms of loss of machinery, etc., downtime, etc. All will be converted, should be rather converted into an economic perspective in the consequential form, but it should not be in probabilistic terms, it should be in definite terms. However, failure of events can be in probabilistic terms. So, risk involves probability of failure and of course, estimate of potential loss as well caused because of such failures. Let us see how international agencies, regulatory bodies define risk. Let us take for example, definition of risk by various levels or agencies in international forum. Let us say ISO 2002, let us say how ISO, International Standards Organization, defines risk. Risk is defined as combination of probability of an event and its outcome. If you look at ISO 13702, which is subsequently ISO 1999B, risk is defined as probability at which a specific hazard event will occur and the harshness of the event. Mathematically, risk can be expressed as algebraic sum of I, probability of an event and consequence of an event, where I is actually the number of events counted. So, P is the probability of occurrence of accident, C is the consequence. Of course, the number count I depends upon how many events you are considering for estimating the overall risk of the whole plant. So, there is a very critical observation about this particular expression. Let us call C equation as 1. Equation 1 has a very critical observation. Equation 1 defines risk in a statistical look, because probability is involved there, which means the value in practice shall never be discovered because it looks only in the mathematical manner or in the statistical manner, the whole problem. But what we are interested in, not the statistical look of risk, we have to look at the value of risk. That is why we say HSE practices. So, we are not bothered about what is the risk of a specific event, though we are interested in knowing, and we already know the probability of such events and the consequences in terms of financial loss. We are interested in knowing what is the overall value depreciating the property worth or the business worth of oil and gas sector industry as a whole, because we are associating economic index to any such statistical computation, which is a very innovative way of looking risk, which is applicable very stringently to offshore oil and gas industries, because friends, we all know this is one of the important backbone of economic build-up of any nation. So, we are not very curious to know what is the statistical outcome of any risk of an event, we are ultimately interested to know the value. So, I must convert risk some way or the other in a financial form. For example, if you say in an accident 150 people died, though it is undesirable, it is unwarranted, it is not good to know that so many people in a crew expired because of some accident, but ultimately as an investor, as an offshore engineer, as a risk analyst, we must be also able to convert the so called death of 150 people in a crew to an equivalent financial loss, because it is all about the investment of the whole business. We have already said why offshore business is unique in the world, because of its high nature of investment, because of the complexity in the design, because of its uniqueness in the whole exercise. No such parallel industry can compete with the offshore oil and gas sector, because of a simple reason, whatever steps you follow, right from analysis, planning, construction, design, execution, exploration, decommissioning, all are completely innovative, case specific, site specific, and known to and experienced only to a small sector of people in the world as an experienced professional in oil and gas sector. So, we, the group of oil and gas sector, should be more concerned, I am underlining the statement, to be more concerned towards the economic index of risk. So, my risk analysis should ultimately lead to me towards the economic perspective of risk estimates. Though I will do QRA, though I will do HAZOP, I will be able to extract, I should be able to present to my management, to my public, to my stakeholders, what is the economic perspective of the whole risk involved in the industry. So, financing risk is a very interesting term which now integrates oil business with a tough risk. So, one may be interested in asking a curious question, how one can finance risk? If you know there is risk involved, who will finance it? Okay, every insurance company in general does this. You are buying a car, you hold a license, you are hale and healthy, but still you insure, because there could be an accident and therefore your risk is financed in terms of insurance, where you pay premium every year. This is common in every country in the world. Similarly, you are hale and healthy, you work for about 40-45 years, you retire at the age of 60-65, You earn salary, you are having every efficiency to build up your lifestyle in a comfortable manner, and no human being wishes to die as early as possible. Therefore, you are healthy, you take care of your health, but still you do health insurance, because there is always a risk because of the external atmospheric conditions or the environmental conditions which may lead you to a catastrophic or a fatal end. Therefore, insure your life so that your followers, your dependents will get benefit of the fine arts. Therefore, in common day to day life also, like driving a car or living, breathing, working, etc., everywhere you see risk is directly connected to financial perspective. So, why not in oil and gas industry? Because oil and gas industry business is a very huge investment block. One should always convert, one should have an attempt to convert at least the risk involved in this industry to an equivalent financial terms. So, financing risk is a thought process happened in early 80s, where we look into the mathematical model in the next lecture how it can be easily done, and how interestingly one can really find out what is the extent of risk involved in terms of economic perspective in a process industry by taking an example. We will do that, and we will have a conversion of mathematical model which helps me to understand risk in economic perspective. Though this equation gives me risk only in statistical perspective, though one is interested mathematically, but as an offshore engineer, as an oil and gas sector professional, I do not stop here. I want to go one step ahead and try to see what is the economic influence if risk is involved in my industry. Because I am answerable to my stakeholders, I am answerable to my investors, I am answerable to my management, above all I am answerable to my own profession. Am I doing it risk safe business? Why? Because oil exploration is a natural intervention in the process. When you intervene with the nature, you must ensure safety, otherwise nature will become furious and show an after effect on the intervention. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this lecture we try to understand some of the important lessons of accidents. We converted the whole observation in terms of mathematical findings and physical observations. We understood the chronological events, we looked into the plus and minus of these incidents, and we ultimately redefined risk based on our understanding so far, and we connected, we bridged risk to an economic perspective as we just now saw from the equation 1. Thank you very much.